Watch this.
Only 3 sleeps out from the start of the 2026 legislative session, and what's on the agenda? Some Idaho Democrats we spoke with are worried about the budget. Meanwhile, a House Republican believes that Idaho's finances are just fine.
The safest place is behind the plow.
You know what's not so Idaho? Trying to pass a snowplow when it isn't safe. We have a word from the Idaho Transportation Department on winter driving in the Gem State. Yes, it is Friday, and here we are, the Friday before the Idaho legislative session. On Monday, we will kick off the 2026 lawmaking campaign, and technically, the legislature gavels in at noon, but at 1 p.m. is where the attention will be. The governor delivers his State of the State address. Governor Brad Little will give his vision and ideas for the year, likely celebrate some wins in his eyes. And to set the stage for Monday, it's important that we remember it takes 2 to tango. The governor will deliver what his proposed budget looks like, but it is up to the legislature to do the work on it. Lawmakers and the governor, they do not always see eye to eye on everything, so there is always intrigue into where the legislation falls and what Governor Little gets to actually sign or not sign into law. The budget discussion this year will frame the conversation more so than probably ever in the recent years. There is a projected budget deficit of about $40 million that we've covered at length, and there is a massive range of opinions on why that is. I spoke with Idaho Democratic leadership for their perspectives on the budget situation. We heard from Idaho's governor yesterday. Minority Leader in the House, Representative Alana Rubel, and Senate Minority Leader, Senator Melissa Wintrow, had this to say.
The GOP leaders cut massive amounts of revenue. They did giant tax cuts in every way, shape, or form. They enacted a voucher bill. They really went way over what our DF, we have this division of financial management who's made up of these very smart people with PhDs in economics. They projected a certain amount of revenue that they thought we would get. Then the legislature came in and said, nah, let's just say we're going to get $500 million more than that, and we'll spend that and use all that for these tax cuts. So they did giant tax cuts that were not in line with the amount of revenue we thought we were going to get. Sure enough, the revenue came in way short of this kind of fake number that they projected. We are now $555 million short of even the bare bones skeleton budgets to keep our agencies operating. But it gets worse because usually at the beginning of session, we bring something called the conformity bill where we conform to new changes in the federal law. There was that one big, beautiful bill act. If we conform to that, that's almost another $300 million probably out of our revenue. So we would be looking at being over $800 million short for the bare bones budgets to keep our agencies going. It's frightening.
And we dive in deep this Sunday morning on Viewpoint at 9 a.m. And on top of that, though, what we just heard about, the governor touched on a major topic for the session yesterday. If you missed our report, check it out right now, ktvb.com. But he talked about how Idaho will handle tax cuts in the federal so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. Idaho has the opportunity to conform or agree to a list of provisions, close to 40. Without a law that says Idaho's going to do otherwise, Idaho is expected to go in and conform with all the cuts approved by Congress. In fact, the governor said that he basically told the president on a personal level that this is going to get done. Well, the Tax Foundation at the national level, they have forecast that the cost to Idaho and its budget is about $167.4 million, and that's revenue every year until this tax package expires, and that for now would be 2028. Because of tax cuts, revenue is cut to the state. So if you ask across the aisle, though, the Republicans, there is a vastly different feeling than what we just heard from the Democrats. I've even heard from Republican lawmakers who tell me they thought the tax cuts that were signed into law this past year were great, and they think even more taxes could be cut again this session. House Speaker Mike Moyle explained how he sees it.
In Idaho, we left here with a balanced budget, substantial reserves on the bottom line, and we're in good shape. And that's why we're in good shape today. But I want to emphasize something. One of the things that really bothers me when I read the paper, it sounds like the whole world's coming to an end in Idaho. We're talking about, what, 5% cut Our ag guys are looking at substantially higher cuts than that because of what they're put up with. And they'll make those reductions and they'll get through it. The state of Idaho is in good shape. It's going to be good. We're all going to do well. We'll do our best to protect education in those important budgets. But at the same time, we'll make those needed adjustments to balance the budget and get out of here. And we'll continue to be what we are now, the best state in the nation. Thank you.
All right, so we will have full coverage from the state of the state, first day of the legislative session coming up on Monday at 1 p.m. Our live coverage will actually start during the news at noon, so join us for an hour-long edition of that. Governor Little said this like over and over to the point where like we thought he was kidding. He said that the speech will be 2.5 hours long on Monday, which would be the longest by nearly 2 hours. He said this about a dozen times. His press availability, we're told, is closer to 1:45, so we'll see about the timing on all of that. But either way, right after the speech from the governor, we will have reaction from key players at the State House in real time. Looking forward to that coverage coming up on Monday. An update to Idaho's birth certificate law. We have learned that the state of Idaho can now enforce that people's biological sex be reflected on that document. Today, Attorney General Raul Labrador announced a federal court dissolved an injunction created 8 years ago to stop the state from enforcing that law. Well, this past week, we caught up with Idaho Representative Bruce Skog. We had an extended conversation with him about the president's executive order reclassifying marijuana from Class 1 to Class 3 and what it means for the state here.
Well, as a state representative, as a former prosecutor, as a voter in Idaho, I was very disappointed in the executive order. It does not follow the medicine, the science, and the societal damage that legalizing marijuana shows us is now happening across the nation. So I was very surprised by that.
One of the very rare times that you'll hear the Idaho delegation at the state level or the congressional level disagree with something the Trump administration did. And let's get some of your viewer comments on this hot topic now, including Douglas writes to us, why does the party of limited government always want to tell people how they are allowed to live? This is a conversation that I've had at the State House as well with lawmakers. Sometimes we get to deliver some of your questions like this to lawmakers, and they say that's a matter of perspective. I've had some Republicans tell me that they like the concept of limited government. However, they do believe that government in its limited sense should be operating in an optimal way. That's where you see the partisan politics get into a little bit of a debate back and forth there. So that's a perspective I've had from what I would say a high-ranking Republican at the State House. Let's get to another comment. Mark says, why does Idaho control/allow alcohol then? It ruins lives, it causes violence. Mark goes on to say weed causes the munchies, or the munchies? I think he's talking about munchies. Yes, that's something that I've also asked about at the state level, and I will tell you, there are some lawmakers for, you could say, religious or personal reasons that believe that maybe alcohol should be controlled more closely. However, you can look all the way back to alcohol prohibition, and you can imagine where that went. The state of Idaho, for example, does control alcohol in a different way than some other states. For example, you may notice all the liquor stores around the state of Idaho, they are all state controlled. They are all state run, and some of that is derived in the root of temperance. So there you go. But yes, that is a comment I've heard many times. Moving on from marijuana to a more legislative related question. Judy says, does anyone besides me see a problem with both co-chairs of JFAC being from the same district? So the incoming co-chairs will be Representative Josh Tanner from the House and Senator Scott Groh from the Senate. They are both in District 14, which is the Eagle area. And I thought this was a great question, Judy, because it is not something that off the top of my head I had thought about when the announcement about Josh Tanner was made earlier this week. So I am asking around at the State House, but I would be curious if anyone has a perspective on two co-chairs being from the exact same area. Of course, the JFAC group is made up of Republicans and Democrats from across the state, so there is definitely a lot of opinions on that. But in terms of who's controlling the committee, that is an interesting thought. You can always text us 208-321-5614. All right, we'll get to more comments later in the show. We'll be right back after this. 411 from across the 208. People gathered in downtown Boise last night to protest after a woman in Minnesota was shot and killed during an ICE operation. Our Aspen Shumpert has that and more in the 411.
This morning, officers responded to a school bus flipped on its side in a ditch near Eustick and McDermott Road. No other cars were involved in the crash. The Ada County Sheriff's Office says only minor injuries have been reported. The cause of the crash is still under investigation. In Idaho, people are making their voices heard about ICE activity in Minneapolis. Protesters gathered outside Boise City Hall yesterday. There was also a press conference ahead of the demonstration.
What we saw yesterday was so far beyond the reaches of American law, law enforcement, or ICE agents that this should never have happened.
This isn't the only protest that happened yesterday. Demonstrators gathered in cities across the country, including Minneapolis, Colorado Springs, San Francisco, and New York. The families of 4 University of Idaho students murdered in Moscow back in 2022 are suing Washington State University. They filed a joint lawsuit last night. The civil complaint alleges WSU was negligent and legally liable for hiring and supervising Brian Koberger, a former graduate student and teaching assistant. Koberger was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison for murdering Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. The lawsuit also includes wrongful death claims for each of Koberger's victims. The family did not disclose a dollar amount for their claimed damages.
Well, a live look outside. A light dusting, as they say, of snow on the foothills, but it's been a record warm winter here in Idaho so far. Ski resorts opened later than what we had hoped for, and not all the chairlifts were able to open at the same time. Thankfully for the resort, skiers and boarders they are getting a little more action up there now. And even though Idaho has had some record precipitation, there's not as much snowpack as needed in the mountains for that spring runoff that we need to fight the drought. And that could change, but overall, a slow start to the winter for southern and central Idaho. Praying for snow is what we are doing now. But 9 years ago, do you remember this? It was quite a different story. In fact, this time 9 years ago, there was so much snowfall, people around Idaho dubbed it Snowmaggedon. Boise had a total of 39 inches of snow, making it the 8th snowiest year on record. And kids, they stayed because several weeks of snow days, and people were delayed everywhere because of the unsafe conditions, and truckers were making their way through Ontario. They had to pull over for the night before getting to their finals destinations. This was quite a time. I remember when we were doing the road reports, Joe on the road, and we would fly around the valley in the car and show the conditions in everyone's neighborhood. And they told me it never does this. I moved from Colorado. They told me, oh, it never does this. And they were right. That was a once in a lifetime winter, it appears. Let's get to Audrielle Tackett now with your weekend forecast. Audrielle, quite the contrast now from 9 years ago.
Yes, an extreme contrast, Joe. So far this January, now we're only a little more than a weekend, but we have seen less than 1/10 of an inch so far this January. So that's trace amounts, not even anything considered measurable just yet. Now, so far this season, since November, we have had one day with 1/10 of an inch of snow that's fallen in Boise. 5 other days so far since November with trace amounts of snow. But again, trace is not considered measurable. So it is a big difference for Boise there. Mountains seeing a little bit. These are some numbers of inches of snow that we've seen so far this week in some of our ski resorts. So good news there because we have a drier week ahead. So Bogus seeing 21 inches this week, Brundage 20 inches, Tamarack, one of the areas that saw the most snowfall within this week, about 30 inches. So just about 2.5 feet of fresh snow, but Sun Valley, Pomerel also seeing some inches stack up this week. Boise not seeing anything stacking, and we won't see any for the next week ahead. We have very calm, cool, and dry conditions ahead of us for the weekend ahead. 41 right now outside. Winds are light, but there is a little bit of a wind chill out there. It's feeling like it's in the mid-30s. Any slight winds are impacting the way it feels outside just because our temperatures are cool. Magic Valley is being impacted the most today with those wind chills. They've still had a breezier day while the rest of the area saw those winds die down compared to what we saw yesterday. So Magic Valley right now is at freezing or below temperature-wise, but the field temperatures in the light pink here, it's feeling like it's down in the low 20s for south central Idaho. In the Treasure Valley, it will be a mild evening. It will be cool, so if you go out on your Friday night, you're going to want to wear the layers, but it will be a very clear and dry night. That is, not expecting cloud cover, so that will also allow fog to develop overnight, and we have a little bit of an inversion that will set up this weekend, so that's also going to contribute to fog and reduced visibility potentially by the time we get to the end of this weekend. So this is this big ridge of high pressure that is building into the northwest, or rather the western states within the U.S., but you can see that it redirects our jet stream, our atmospheric flow. So there is a plume of moisture that's approaching from the west, but because our jet stream is flowing to the north of us, it's going to direct the moisture that way as well. So Washington and northern Idaho could see precipitation in the coming days, but as for us in southern Idaho, Boise, eastern Oregon, we're not expecting that precipitation just because it won't be allowed to move that far south. Meanwhile, we just see clouds at the most in the form of precipitation. Even our mountains will stay relatively dry over the next several days, essentially a 0% chance of really seeing any precipitation. The one spot that may see a sprinkle or two on Monday is going to be Valley County. Boise is expecting these partially cloudy skies and dry conditions to stick around for at least 4 or 5 more days into the middle of next week. So your weekend right now, Saturday and Sunday, looks really decent to get out and about and do some things. Waking up to temperatures in the 20s, so it will be cool starts to the day. You're definitely going to still need the coats, but by afternoons, we're looking like reaching the 40s, and we'll stay there for most of the week.
Wow. Okay. Thank you, Audrielle. All right. So something that is so not Idaho, crashing into snowplows that are trying to clear the roads for all of us. It's happened again for the second time this winter season. The Idaho Transportation Department writes that They talk a lot about giving plow space, and there's a reason they talk about it. On Wednesday, January 7th, this week, one of their trucks was hit while working on clearing their snowy roads operations, and thankfully, the plow wasn't heavily damaged and the operator was okay, but the crash caused major delays. Hours later, there were still impacts. Drivers, responders, crews, all trying to just do their job safely. So this happened on Highway 55. The story ITD says is that a moving company's box truck, it tried to pass an ITD snowplow on the right side, knocking the right-hand plow structure. So ITD has this thought for everybody who thinks about doing this.
So in general, people just need to give a plow space. It's a very large vehicle, and sometimes the plow will actually be over in your lane a little bit because it needs to plow the center line as well. So the key is people just need to give a plow space. We ask about 200 feet for a plow of space so that it can maneuver.
And look, we get it, all right? We're all on the roads. Sometimes you get stuck behind the active plow and you just want to get around it and move on. And ITD says there are just some things you really should consider with that move.
Because of the number of plows we have, they're only plowing each road every 2 to 3 hours. So because of that, when you pass a plow, you're passing onto an unplowed road. The safest place is always behind the plow. And so we encourage people to not pass a plow. And if there's availability, the plow's going to pull over and let cars by as often as they can. It's also critically important to never pass a plow on the right. You'll see if you ever come out to a safety training event, or if you ever get to see a plow stop, that they have a wing plow that extends 10 feet to the right of a plow. So a lot of times when people think that they can pass a plow, they don't see that wing plow and then end up hitting it.
Another thing to consider from ITD, if you hit a plow, it takes it out of commission, and that is one less plow that is in your area doing the work, keeping roads safe enough to drive on. For the most up-to-date information on road closures and conditions, you can always check out Idaho 511. All right, we got some comments we're going to throw up on the big board here. This one is a long one, so I'm going to read it off the laptop. Michal writes in that as a retired oncology RN, I can tell you that medical marijuana is very useful in controlling nausea, pain, depression, and stimulating appetite in patients receiving chemotherapy. Because it's not legal in our state, patients have to rely on opioids and anti-nausea medications, which can all impair ability to function normally more than marijuana. It also has been shown to prevent seizures in some individuals who didn't find relief from other medications. So there's one comment there from Michal. Let's get another one here. This one says from Tracy and Cuna, interesting format. I like being able to get more viewer comments. Moving forward on the 208, we're trying to work in more viewer comments and not save all of them from the end of the show. So keep them coming. We're going to try to work them in throughout the half hour as we do the program. This one says, I hope Joe reads this. Joe, we've really enjoyed you over the years, and it's sad that you're leaving. You and Brian had a show that really compares to none. Yes, we love doing the 208. The 208 is going to continue with Hunter Funk when I retire at the end of the month. This person writes, from all the short people in the Treasure Valley, you will be missed. Hello to the shorts. Good to see you out there. And then so sorry to see Joe leave KTVB. We enjoyed his thorough reporting and positive attitude. He will be missed. Thank you so much for the kind comments. They really mean a lot. They really warm my heart. We will stay in touch, of course. And yes, Hunter for the 208, absolutely. Hunter's the best. We'll see you Monday.